Okay. All right, here we are. Welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. And we are currently in November, which we are getting to the heat of award season now. So I'm just starting to get a lot more films that have been flooding in recently. It's been a little bit hard to keep up. But I'm going to try to catch up on some today. So, what are we reviewing today? We're going to review the latest psychological horror film called Heretic, which came out last weekend. I'll also be taking a look at some, in terms of like movies that are out right now, I'll also be covering Memoir of a Snail. It's the latest film from Adam Elliott, who you might remember from Mary and Max fame, so it's a stop-motion animated film. I'll also be covering Martha, the documentary on Martha Stewart that's currently playing on Netflix. I'll also be sorry, I keep saying other. I will also be covering Unstoppable, the true story about a one-legged wrestler, which will be debuting on Amazon Prime next month. So that's an early review, and an even earlier review for Nickel Boys, which I believe will be expanding next month, but it's not. It's one of those like awards season films that aren't really going to be. It's not going to have like a bigger spread until January, but you're going to hear a lot of people talking about it come December when it starts getting a limited release. So that's definitely the earliest review. And it's one that I've been thinking about for a lot. I saw it about 3 weeks ago, and it has not left my mind, and I really want to discuss it today, which I will do. So, if you would like to, we'll get to the reviews, but if you'd like to be informed on the latest films as well as the films that are going to be coming out later this year, and like I said, it's award season, so we're going to be getting a lot more of those right now. At this point, it's mostly just kind of, it's mostly kind of like catch up at this point, because I've started getting screeners for like films from later in the year that I'm just starting to like catch up on now after everything that's been going on. But if you want to stay informed, be sure to subscribe to this channel and like this video so that a lot more people know about the latest movies, because that's all we talk about here. Two updates, though, before we get into that, though. I am getting closer to finishing my book on the history of Saturday morning cartoons, which is on my Patreon. Should be in the description for this video, so you can check it out there. It's worth checking out because the book, very close to finishing it, and I imagine it's probably going to be, it's definitely going to be over like $20. So there's a $15 tier there, so if you'd like a discount, stay informed on this channel. I'll let you know if you want to subscribe at that point. But the reason to subscribe to the Patreon there is not just because I have exclusive videos there, but because I do post chapters from the history of Saturday morning cartoon book as I'm going there. So if you want to read what I currently have, it's all up there. And one other big update is that this Wednesday at the Imogene Willow Creek in Minnesota, I will be hosting Secret Movie Night, which is, if you've never been to Secret Movie Nights, they're a lot of fun. It's basically, people buy tickets, they have no idea what they're going to see. The only person who knows what is going to go up on that screen is going to be me and the people who run the program at the theater there. And it's going to be a big surprise, and it's fun because I get to host it. I get to kind of tease it a little, and then after the film is done, I host a little discussion about like the history of the film. And it's one of my favorite films. I will not reveal it here because I don't want anyone to spoil it, but I'll talk about it after. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the reviews for this week. Let's start off with the one that you can watch in theaters right now, called Heretic. All right. I don't know why I'm rolling up my sleeves. I don't need to. I think it's just because the light there gets really hot. Okay. All right, here we go with Heretic in 3, 2, 1. So Heretic is a religious psychological horror film about two young Mormon girls who are trapped in the house of a man who challenges their belief. And the thing that I like about this film right from the start is that it always feels like it's challenging. Like, it never feels like it just kind of like settles into like a typical type of like horror thriller about two people being trapped in a house and a psychopath trying to keep them there. because I kept waiting throughout the film for like that moment for like the grin to drop from the mastermind's face, and for him to start like slitting throats, and then, you know, like reveal what he's all about, and then like, you know, like, okay, the jig's up, time to start like killing and torturing. And thankfully that never happens. And to the benefit of the film, I think, because it works for the person doing the trapping here, which is Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant has kind of like taken this turn from like doing like romantic comedies and dramas into more like horror and thriller type films. And here, I think this film plays to his strengths of just kind of being like a very charming and likable guy, because if you've seen him in films like Paddington 2, he can play up a villain, but he can play up a villain who's very eccentric, you know, who knows how to have like a charming presence, where even when he's being sinister and dastardly, you can't help but watch to see what he's going to do next. And he's very much in his element here as Mr. Reed, because he adopts this persona of just being like this kind of like eccentric theologian of like a college professor who is very much engaged with like the topic of religion and wants to like very much like challenge you, to the point where like it's scary like how engaged he is in all of this, even when it starts turning dark. So his two victims that he has in this are two Mormon sisters. There's Sister Barnes, played by Sophie Thatcher, and Sister Paxton, played by Chloe East. And they have differing personalities. Like Barnes is very much more, she feels a little bit more firmer in her faith, and I think that's because she has a bit of like a background that we explore in the film, which gives her a lot more depth. Whereas Paxton is a little bit more questioning and cautious, and a little bit more fearful about having her religion challenged as much. It's not so much that she just wants to like shut the topic down. It's that she feels just like a wee bit uncomfortable. Like even she's starting to like pick up some weird vibes when they're invited into the house of Mr. Reed, and it's just like, I don't know if this is such a good idea. Maybe we should play up to what, you know, maybe we should take like the safer route for like, you know, indulging Mr. Reed here. But of course, you know, it's too late for the girls. Like by the time they're already inside, like they're already trapped. Like the doors are locked, and Mr. Reed just kind of plays it off like, well, you know, the doors are on an automatic lock, so if you want to leave, you kind of got to go through the back doors. But you know, like you've seen my place, you know, there's a back door. You can go out that way. Or do you? Do you remember if I had a back door? And I love that aspect of Grant in this film, because like while he does challenge a lot of like the Mormon religion, in fact, there's some downright hilarious moments where he's, you know, challenging them and playing it up, where at one point he's comparing the different iterations of religions over the many eras and compares them to board games. And because basically he compares them to like Monopoly, and he basically says that Mormonism is kind of like, you know, like if Christianity is Monopoly, then Mormonism is like the Bob Ross version of Monopoly, which just the fact that he plays it up so earnestly, I think too, it's so funny, but at the same time also scary, because he maintains this tone throughout. There are a few moments where he's a little bit more silent, but those are aspects of silence where he's more just waiting for these two sisters to kind of like deliver like what they think is the right answer, or the manner in which they think they're going to escape. And I love how the film just lingers on all of the challenging dialogue of this kind of psychological mind game, and how Reed keeps posing these different theories to them, and then kind of challenges these girls to kind of like shoot these ideas down to see just how much further they can progress into what Mr. Reed is really trying to pitch here, which is that he believes he has like the answer to the one true religion. Now, initially, when I heard like this premise for Mr. Reed, when he says like, you know, if you keep going if you keep going farther, you'll eventually discover what the one true religion is, the way that I did in all my years of study, you've kind of set up the film, I think, for a little bit of failure, because there's no possible way, like unless it takes some weird supernatural route by the end, I doubt that, you know, like I doubt that, yeah, like the one true religion is going to be something all that compelling or shocking. And a little bit of a spoiler, it's not a supernatural element, it's more of a psychological element more than anything. But it's a lot like, you know, like those treasure hunting movies, you know, it's not the destination, it's the way that you get there. This is very much the case with Heretic, because by the time it does delve deeper into what Mr. Reed is really doing in his house and what his real sinister intent is. It's an idea that you can understand how he came to that conclusion after all of his studies, but it's more fun to just watch how much further down, like literally going down into his house, that they probe to kind of learn a lot more about Mr. Reed and his beliefs, like at the same time challenging them. Because the thing about Barnes and Paxton is that they're not just like pushovers. They're not like kind of those atheists, or they're not like the Mormons who kind of like waffle about their religion. They're astute enough where they can push back on Mr. Reed, which makes the film much more challenging, because like it's not so much a matter of like, you know, where are we going to find a knife? What blunt object can we use to beat him with? The film does eventually get to that point. If you are wondering, yes, there are moments where they do start attacking Mr. Reed. But the bubbling up to that point is just allowing the challenging dialogue to keep building and building and building. Because I'm sure that some people have probably seen like the trailer. There's a scene in the trailer where Mr. Reed says like, you got to go out the back door, but you have to choose which one you want to go through. And like, this one is belief, this one's disbelief. And which one are you going to go through? And the thing is, in the actual film, even after he does that, he still keeps the girls in the room by keep talking to them. He keeps talking to them a lot more about their religion and how he compares them to other religions that he's found. And Barnes just pushbacks hard. She realizes that, like, you know, look, you know, the things you're comparing here are not comparative to, you know, how we set up our system of belief. It's not quite matching here. There's inconsistencies. She's smart in that way, where she's kind of embraced more for religion, whereas Paxton is a little bit more, I don't quite want to say more naive, but she's more like, she has more pop culture ingrained with her, that she can challenge Mr. Reed. Like at one point she starts like, you know, misquoting, not quite misquoting, but like she's echoing the same sentiments of Mr. Reed in her challenge of philosophy, but at the same time she's referencing like Spider-Man and stuff like that, which actually plays up to what Mr. Reed is doing here, because he actually does compare, like I said, religion to board games, and also music as well, which I thought was really fascinating. So this film is definitely, it's all about atmosphere and just having Grant having this consistent grin on his face and always challenging these girls. And he's got like the thick glasses and the cozy sweater. And he, like I said, he looks like a college professor. He's got that look down pat, and just the way he keeps, offering up challenges and never making it seem like he's a serial killer, but that he's just engaging in an experiment and that you just kind of have to go along with it. It's just frightening, because like even when like the hammer does drop, it still feels like he's teaching a lesson the whole time. There's never a moment where he drops that smirk and that inquisitive, stuffy nature that he has to himself throughout. And just Grant's natural performance with that just works so well for it. So yeah, it's a very creepy atmosphere, although I do have to mention this. So this is a bit of a weird thing that I feel like I have to mention. Okay, so when I went to go see Heretic, we saw this at the Alamo Draft House, where A24 does most of their screenings. They mainly do them there because there's a live Q&A that happens afterwards. But this particular time, they decided to have a special screening for Heretic, by what's called the immersive experience. Now, I had heard what this was going to be about, because like apparently at one point Mr. Reed deceives these girls by saying, "Oh, my wife has pie in the oven," and they smell pie, but then they soon realize that it's just a candle that says blueberry pie. So I heard that they were going to start piping like the smell of blueberries into the theater, and they definitely weren't. Like, okay, it's a bit thick, like, but I can smell it. It's like it's a bit strong. Yeah, okay, it smells like blueberry pie in here. And then they brought out actual blueberry pie to everyone at the table. It's like, oh, okay. I guess there is actual pie, which is, I guess, a bonus for us. I mean, Barnes and Paxton didn't really get pie in the film, so I feel a little bit guilty eating this in front of them a little bit. But I was surprised. It was actually like a pretty big piece of pie as well. It was bizarre. And at first I thought like, okay, oh, was the smell just like the pie that they were baking? And then it was just wafting in there. But then I realized when I got home and I smelled my sweater, it's like, oh no, they pumped something in there. Cause like, you know how like you go to a campfire and you can still smell the fire smoke in your shirt after you're done with it. It was the same thing when I went to the screening. I could still smell the blueberries on my shirt that I had to wash it immediately after. I don't know. It was a bit more. It was a bit too distracting, I think. But I think in terms of like the actual atmosphere in the film, you don't. It might help, but you don't need the blueberry pie for that immersive experience unless you like that smell-o-vision type stuff. Because the film works well enough on its own. I don't think it will be. I think some people might be a little bit dismayed because they don't think because it's not something quite as shocking philosophically. There is something viscerally shocking by the end of the film with its major twist about what Mr. Reed is really doing. To say nothing of like the little cameo here by Topher Grace playing one of the elders of the Mormon Church, which I thought was kind of neat. He's a little bit of like a red herring because there's like several moments where it seems like there's an out for the characters and then it's taken away from them. Just because like it's satisfying in the way that it keeps the girls locked in the house with like a believable reason, but also keeps the tension mounting as well because like they realize there's no way out, so they have to engage in all of Mr. Reed's mind games, which span from like near-death experiences to simulation theory to the philosophy of control and manipulation, and it delves into so many interesting spots here. That even if it doesn't feel like it's fully exploring these topics as much as I'd like them to, and believe me, they go pretty deep around here, around these topics here and there. But Grant's performance, I think, keeps you locked into it, where you're always constantly questioning and thinking, especially with such a damn good performance. Like this is probably my favorite film with Hugh Grant playing up a villain. Which is saying something because like Paddington, he was pretty damn good in Paddington too, but he's much better here because he's not just like mugging for the camera or just playing an eccentric who's gonna drop the act once he's got the girls in the hole and can start threatening them with weapons. No, he's that way throughout, and I think that makes him so much more terrifying and just an intriguing villain. So yeah, on the philosophical and religious level, I think that Heretic does enough to keep you engaged in this trapped atmosphere, and Hugh Grant makes this film. That's pretty much the reason to see this film, and I'm sure it's the reason a lot of people are going to go see it. So yeah, come for Grant's performance, stay for like the deeper questioning of the afterlife and religion and where we're going and what exactly we want out of life with all these deep philosophical questions. So yeah, as a psychological thriller, it's a damn good one. Damn good like blueberry pie. So Heretic is currently playing in theaters right now. Did the chat get Oh, that's weird. I think like the chat disconnected for a moment there. I hope it's still reading there. It should be. But yeah, Heretic currently playing in theaters. Damn good. Go check it out. I don't know if they're still doing the immersive experience at the Alamo. I would say don't go if you don't want your clothes to smell like blueberries. Because like the pie, like I said, the pie was big, but it wasn't a great pie. Like it was a little bit like it felt a lot like almost kind of like gummy compote, which I don't fault them too much because you're making pie slices for like an entire room of people. So I didn't hold them to that much. I didn't hold them to a high standard. I don't know why I would. All right, let's talk about another film currently in theaters right now. That's Memoir of a Snail. There's a stop-motion animated film by Adam Elliott. Get some water here. All right, here we go. In 3, 2... Oh, hang on. There we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, Memoir of a Snail is the latest stop-motion film from Adam Elliott, who you might remember he directed a film called Mary and Max, which is a very, very sweet but also very honest animated film about addressing the honesty and the loneliness that we experience in life with like our different perceptions, and just feeling like we're separated from other people and trying to find a way to connect. Memoir of a Snail is very much in that same ballpark. Like, if you loved Mary and Max, I would definitely say yes, you need to see Memoir of a Snail. But this film, I think, it benefits from being a little bit more blunt and personal, and embracing a little bit more of the darkness so that its heart can swell up a lot more. And I think what makes that type of what makes this type of film work, I think, is just that it feels like Eliot's magnum opus. He has said that this is more or less kind of like a representation of his life, and it becomes more apparent as the film goes along. Is this a biographical film about Adam Elliot or someone he knows? And it's like, yeah, it kind of is about Adam Elliot. So the film is about Grace Puddle, funny name, yeah, voiced by Sarah Snook. And Grace has not had a very she's had like moments of joy in her life, but she's also had a lot of darkness as well. And she makes that clear. Like, the film opens up with her best friend Pinky, this very old woman, dying. And then soon after her death, Grace is letting her snail go. And as her snail departs, she starts regaling it with the entire story of her life, which is one that's filled with like it's filled with sadness, but also like some small moments of joy that shine a lot brighter. Like, she brings up how her father was like a performer, how her mother died during childbirth, but she still, she had her brother Gilbert voiced by Cody Smith-McPhee. And they grew up together, just, looking out for each other. Like, Grace would get bullied in school, for, being a little bit more like a squat and pudgy type of girl. But, Gilbert would always come to the rescue. Like, if anyone gave her the middle finger, Gilbert would break that middle finger. And they stick together, and they stick by their father, who, their father, he's a performer, and he tries to, make his living on that. But when he becomes disabled, he finds that there's not much worth living for in life. But because he still has his children, he tries to make the best of it. And, they have their small moments of joy. Like, something like just going on a roller coaster just gives their father that extra bit of freedom that he feels that he couldn't have again. But then things take a darker turn when their dad dies, and Grace and Gilbert are separated, and they're trying to find their way back to each other, despite the fact that they have very weird foster parents who just make their lives all the much more stranger. Because, like, Gilbert gets shipped off to this apple orchard where the foster parents are very, very religious, like to a disturbing degree. And Grace ends up spending her time with these foster parents who are basically swingers. Like, they like the idea of having children, but it's clear they would much rather be running around having sex with other people. And the film kind of shows that, which, yeah, I should address that. This film isn't afraid to go to some places that involve a lot of sex and nudity as well. Like, at one point, Grace addresses this this disgust she has with herself for her body, especially when she ends up having a boyfriend who more or less seems to be working against the detriment of her health and kind of obsessing over her fat to a degree that she wasn't comfortable with, and she didn't like that her boyfriend wasn't upfront about this, and just made her hate herself all the much more. But then, just like this film is all about finding connections, and Grace finds a connection through snails because, like, at first he just wanted to be a snail because snails can, go into their shell, take protection from the rest of the world. But then she finds a more human companion with the eccentric old woman Pinky, called that way because she had apparently accidentally cut off her own pinky. And much like Grace, Pinky has also had a lot of shortcomings in her life. Like, she had a lot of men that she loved, but they died in ways that are so bizarre and embarrassing that even though it's very tragic and it's sad that she lost some people in her life, you kind of have to laugh a little bit at it, if only just, to keep going. Not to mention the fact that, like, Pinky is both, like, she's both sweet with Grace, but also very vocal. Like if people start harassing her, or there's like cars honking at her across the street, she'll flip them off. She'll just look right back at them, give them the finger, and call them an asshole. It's the type of old woman you'd want to, when you're growing up in your 20s and 30s, like you want to have like that type of connection with someone who's kind of more or less been where you have, with all the tragedies that you've had in your life, but also someone who's been prepared to face them as well. And just someone to help out with you, and it makes like a lot of those sweeter moments in Grace's many narrations here, because the entire film is mostly just it's narrated by Grace, with some occasional narration by Gilbert when he sends letters off to Grace, and just forming that bond and connection and just weathering the storm through the toughest of times. And they're really tough for Grace. They're so. It's so gut-wrenching, because like for every moment where there's like this quirky bit of charm within the stop motion of just like these like orgies, or just bizarre slapstick, or just taking note of like Grace's collection of snails, or Pinky's history of sleeping with celebrities, and being a stripper. Just all these little quirks are fun, and they really feel needed and warranted and balanced in a film where there's a lot of like gut-wrenching moments where like like cherished childhood items are destroyed, and it feels like the people you love in your life are all dying around you, and not feeling that you can like even just get out of bed in the morning, just approaching all these very depressing moments, and then just kind of like easing back into a little bit of like life's little wonders, and not even just like the brightest of fun moments, but just small, simple, loving moments that can convince you to live another day and just get back out of bed and just realize that there might be something better over the horizon. And I think what works to the benefit of this film is that it's much like in the style of Mary and Max, where it has like this grungy look, where the characters are all very big-eyed and squat, which does give it a little bit more, I think, of Elliot's own personal charm, or like it looks very distinct. Like it doesn't look like a Leica animation or Aardman Studio or something like that. It's very much his own style, and also like the color palette is very earthy. Like it's, like I said, very grungy. Like within like the opening shot, the opening shot pretty much just, with the way it's filmed, it looks like a garbage dump. Even though it's mostly just supposed to be Grace's home, which is a bit messy. But I think having that very earthy tone gives the film a very personal quality, as well as making its moments of charm feel much needed. It's like seeing. It's very much like, I think, how my favorite film, The Apartment, was described, where it's like watching a single flower grow and blossom within a garbage dump. And that's very much the best way, I think, to describe Memoir of a Snail, is because like it's very sweet, but it's also very gut-wrenching. Like there are moments where Grace experiences like the worst feelings that any human could feel, and just lies down and cry about it. And you want to cry with her, because her whole life has been just series after series of terrible things, with little moments of glee in between there. Like, and it's just smaller moments, like, Grace and Gilbert waking up their father if, he's snoring too loud, or Grace wrapping up a hobo in Christmas lights just to give him a little bit of cheer, which he does thankfully appreciate and doesn't hate her for that. And it all just keeps building, where you're fascinated to see where Grace will go, and just hope that she has a happy ending. Which, if I don't know how much of a spoiler this is, but there is a bit of a happy ending at the end of this. Not like a super happy ending, or even like quite like, I'd say, like a bittersweet ending. It just feels like the right way to bring an end to this story, where you feel good out after everything that has happened with Grace, and it's very much a film that earns its heart, much like Mary and Max, where like you get to spend a lot of time with the characters, you get to learn all their quirks and how they interact with their society, and like what is the environment that has shaped them, and just watching them evolve out of that, and just like weather like the hardest storms. While also finding just, sweet and genuinely funny moments here and there. So yeah, there's no other stop motion animated film like this. Even I think I wouldn't even compare it to like Mary and Max as much because like Mary and Max feels like it's gentle, whereas Memoir of a Snail feels like it packs like a harder punch. Like it's not afraid to get, like when it gets dark, it gets super dark. When it gets sincere, it makes the eyes swell. Like I was tearing up during this. So it's very effective at what Adam Elliott has done here. And like I said, this is his masterpiece. I think this is the best film that Adam Elliott has made. And the fact that he made it more of a personal story, I think just makes it so much better. And it's easily, I think, one of the best animated films that I've seen this year. So yeah, I loved the hell out of Memoir of a Snail. So Memoir of a Snail, I believe, is playing in a few theaters right now. If you search around for it, you can definitely find it. All right. Checking along here. All right, what should we get next here? Coming up, we've got, what else we got? We've got Martha, Unstoppable, and Nickel Boys. All right. You know what? Let's go to Nickel Boys. Why not? Let's go for that one. I've noticed I've been losing a few frames here. Is that right? I think only like 127. So, not too much, but I gotta get a new computer. This one I'm working on is like 8 years old, so it's hanging in there, but man, it takes out a bunch of the CPU. Okay, so let's get the notes up here for Nickel Boys. Let's see, just gotta pair a few things here. All right. I just wanted to check, because I thought I knew, but like I want to double check to make sure that I know when this is releasing. Because like I'm a little bit up in the air because I think Memoirs of a Snail is like it's, you know, playing here and there. So let's see. Okay, so Nickel Boys will be opening December 13th, which I believe is a limited release, so I think that's just... Yeah, very limited release. Okay, so it's December 13th for Los Angeles and New York. Or no, wait. For just New York. And then December 20... And weird. Okay, because usually, like, it's New York and Los Angeles for when these come out, but, like, New York is December 13th, and Los Angeles is December 20th. And then I think it's just going to randomly expand in January. Because, like, outside of that, like, January 3rd is when it's coming to the UK. So, okay. Just to make sure, because I don't want to, like, misinform anyone about when this is coming out. All right. So here we go with Nickel Boys. In 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Sorry. I'm going to have to put that up again here. Sorry. I could feel something in my throat, and I was trying to, like, put it down. But it wasn't quite good. Let me get another drink. Pardon the dust in my mouth. All right. Okay. There we go. Ah, that notes got too big there. All right. Here we go now. Take 2 with Nickel Boys in 3, 2, 1. So, Nickel Boys is a historical drama that takes place in the 1960s and revolves around the Nickel Academy Reform School for boys who have been arrested. And I think what I love so much about how this is set up is that it never feels like it's just seen from one perspective. And I think as the film goes along, I think it starts surprising you with how much bigger it becomes as the story keeps going along. So the film revolves around Elwood, who's played by Ethan Heresy. And Elwood is a young man who has just kind of like struggled in the 60s to kind of like grow up and define himself. But it feels like, he might be bound for bigger things. And it feels like, he has a chance to go to a really good school. But all it takes is one wrong car ride with someone to help him get into town. And the cops take him in and they ship him off to reform school. Now, the interesting thing about the way the film is shot, from director Ramel Ross, try not to tongue twist that there. So Ramel Ross directs this entirely from the POV of Elwood. We are constantly seeing everything through the eyes of Elwood here, from like his arrest to him being shipped off to reform school, and just watching as he sits in the car and watches as the white kids who are arrested are being ushered off to this part of the reform school, while he goes into the area where all the black students have been sequestered. Now, what's fascinating about the way that we focus on Elwood is that we do get to endure a lot of the simpler and quieter moments, as well as those moments of just feeling despair about the fact that he might never get out of here. We also get to connect with another character called Turner, who's played by Brandon Wilson. And here's where the film actually literally shifts. The perspective shifts now to Turner, and we see Turner's point of view from having been in Nickel Academy for a while, and has tried to get used to it, and tries to basically show Elwood the ropes and let him know that there are chances where you're not going to be locked into learning stuff all day or working the fields. You can actually do a little bit more on this job by working for people and running errands. But, there's not much more to it than that. You're going to have to get used to it here. And the POV doesn't just turn it over to Turner as though Elwood's story is going to be over at that point. It keeps shifting back and forth. It's like we're either getting Elwood's POV or Turner's POV. So we're constantly locked in with them so that we can feel that level of claustrophobia and despair for being trapped in this situation where it feels like there is no future for these two kids. And then just when you think that's going to be the perspective, is just focusing on these two kids in reform school, the film actually takes a non-linear time jump to when Elwood was much older, and he's played by Taveed Diggs. And here is where the film actually takes a third-person perspective. We see older Elwood's perspective from literally from the back of his head. So we're just following him around. It feels like we're right behind him, like we're just right on his shoulder, and watching as he tries to endure everything that happened after he got out of Nickel Academy, which doesn't get revealed until the end of the film. But we do see the aftermath of what happens with that as Elwood struggles to dig up more information on the academy, and how there were black people buried there were unmarked graves, digging up all the torment that happened there, and then just dealing it with other people, because at one point one of my favorite scenes in the film is when the adult Elwood is just sitting in a bar, and in comes a fellow inmate that he knew from Nickel Academy. And he's clearly hasn't fully recovered. Like, the trauma is still lingering with him. And it's just one of those moments where Elwood finds it, struggling to get through this conversation without, drudging up the past, because he spent his entire time just digging through this material and just, tries to resonate with and attempts to resonate with someone who has experienced the same troubles that he's faced there as well. And then as if that weren't enough, because then we actually we jump back and forth between like the younger Elwood's like POV at Nickel Academy to older Elwood outside of Nickel Academy. But then we're also treated to like montages of the evidence that is unearthed about the Academy, home video of Elwood and how he's gotten used to himself after that time. And this might be like a tipping point for some people, but there are also moments where the camera will just pan up to the stars and just start contemplating life in general, and, you know, showing you like glimpses of the earth and kind of like showing you how much bigger life is just beyond the small world of Nickel Academy. Now, the film, there isn't, in case you're wondering, there is not a real Nickel Academy. There is, however, a real school called the Dozer School for Boys, and it's based. It was mostly based on on a book by Colson Whitehead, so there is real world relation here. But I think through this fictionalized story of showing like this racist version, you know, like not even just like the racism within 1960s Florida, and digging up all of the hurt of the past, and just this longing to escape and this desperation of feeling like you're always trapped, where just like the perspective alone is fascinating for this film, and how it forces you to look at all the angles here of Elwood's life, from just like from a younger first person perspective to an older third person perspective to just an all encompassing, analyzing everything about Elwood's life and life in general, that I think paints this very complete picture about, like how volatile we are with our lives, and how, and how like daunting it can become at times, because the juxtaposition of just going from the POV of just Elwood and Turner just hanging out and reading and chatting with one another, to just getting these beautiful glimpses of like of constellations, and looking down on the earth and thinking about everything that we've done with our lives and everything that has been built within humanity. And I know this seems very, like I might be making this seem very grandiose, as though it's kind of like Tree of Life, and I don't really feel that it's on like the same levels as like a Terrence Malick film, because it never feels like it's jumping around trying to find something to say. It's very clearly trying to tell the story of Elwood and Turner and how they finally decided to escape from Nickel Academy. That's very much like the more grounded story. But then I think for considering the aftermath and how it affects these characters into adulthood, and just like contemplating everything about life in general, I think makes this film so fascinating. And I felt like I had to go back to Terrence Malick, but did it give me that feeling from Tree of Life, where it has like this existential level of just considering everything and letting it wash over you. That's especially true with like the scenes where we get to see just like a smattering of the evidence that Elwood has unearthed. Of just like, like here's newspaper clippings, here's a photograph, here's like something, here's evidence of stuff we dug up from the ground, here's recorded footage of Elwood from the early 2000s, here's all these elements of past lives and current lives that have shaped everything about Elwood that has come afterwards. And I think it might be a little bit frustrating, I think, for some people that it's non-linear, but I think having the film divvied up that way does make you consider so much more than just whether or not Elwood and Turner are going to get out of this situation. And not just like lingering on like the racism of Florida that led them to this predicament. It is lingered on, and there is a despair and a lingering notion of just, feeling that there's nothing you can do within such an unjust system. And I think that is best portrayed through Elwood's grandmother, played by and I'm going to mispronounce his name here, so I'm sorry, but Angeline Ellis Taylor. And Hattie basically tries to fight for Elwood. It tries to find the legal way to help him get out of Nickel Academy, and can't do it. Every time she attempts it, she's swindled. Like she can't convince the judge, she can't convince a lawyer. Lawyers will run off with her money. Just everything she does doesn't work. And I think I think it's interesting to see like how she struggles to maintain that hope, because like before Elwood is shipped off, there's a very sweet moment where Elwood is hanging around Hattie, and they have a good connection that we see throughout the film. But there's one very telling moment where Hattie's just sitting at the dining room table, and she's decorating a cake. And just like the way that Elwood takes this fascination with like her face, and the way that she's decorating this cake, and the way that she just kind of like scrapes off the frosting as she's talking about how hard life can be, and how difficult it is, and just acknowledging it but still trying to find a way to keep moving forward, I think is just such a beautiful, very bittersweet moment in the film, which I think just becomes just because I don't quite want to say like it's like the central theme of the film, because there's much grander themes going on here, but it is one of the more deeply personal moments that I think speaks to how just to how rough life can be. So just fantastic performances here, like from Ethan Harris and of course, like Taveed Diggs is usually pretty damn good, but also Brandon Wilson as Turner. Just fantastic performances from these young actors. They really embody this sort of like longing for more and a desire to learn, but also just recognizing the despair of their current situations. And just, I love the way that Ross directs this film. He has this perfect, Ramel has like this perfect vision for trying to make the audience care about this beyond just like what we might expect from this type of story. Like, because if I were to just tell you that Nickel Boys was just about Elwood and Turner, these two boys who are at reform school and try to escape, that would be too simplistic. That would just, it might be an okay drama that might convince some people, but it would seem very, very simple. And it's so much more than that. Everything from the way that it progresses through time, like we see the adult Elwood at various times in his life, which I think perfectly reflects how it perfectly pairs up with like the greater shots of like space and the history that he unearths. I think it's just everything about the way that it's set up. It makes you think not just about the racism that went on with the 1960s, not just about the inhumanity of reform school, not even just about like, the racial and the political movements that followed and the aftermath and the trauma, but just everything. It makes you think about these people as more than just being like a statistic, or like, victims to be placed in a headline, or someone who's just researching the past. Like, there's so much more to people than that. And I think that Ramo Ross's film perfectly communicates this in a very beautiful and mesmerizing way that I could not stop thinking about. And I'm sure that there's something much deeper, I think, that might be evoked the next time that I see this film, that I'm really excited to see this film again, just because it's one of those films that just, it washes over you. Like, it's one of those films that I attribute to, this might sound weird, but like I attribute it to kind of like Blade Runner 2049, where I go into the theater, I watch this amazing film that locks me in, and then when I leave the theater, I feel like I've just been to another planet. Even though Nickel Boys does take place on our planet, it did feel like I was in an entirely different world while I was watching this film, and just left me with so many thoughts left to contemplate. And just, and it just I cannot stop thinking about the film. So yeah, Nickel Boys has so much more to say than what it might imply from the promotion and the trailers here. So the film definitely had an effect on me, and I can't recommend it enough. Okay, so Nickel Boys will be playing it'll be playing in New York on December 13th. It'll be playing in Los Angeles on December 20th. It'll be playing in the UK on January 3rd. And as for the rest of the US, I imagine it will probably be expanding. If not by Christmas, it will definitely be expanding by January, and definitely by late January, because this is primed for like award season. I have little doubt that Nickel Boys will be up for like at least like I would hope like best actor, best supporting actor, but for sure best picture. I would love to see this in for best picture. Okay. So what do we got next? We got two more here. Let's talk about another upcoming film. So yeah, Unstoppable. This will be coming out in... I believe it comes out on Prime in... I believe it comes out on Prime in December. But I'm not sure when it will be in theaters. Because I'm pretty sure it's going to be in theaters. Let me check here. Okay, so this next one, Unstoppable, this is going to be... Okay, so yeah, so Unstoppable. This one is going to get a limited theatrical release on December 6th, and it will be going to Prime Video on January 16th. Okay. So just got to recall that for when I recommend it. So that when people like say, oh, where do I see these films? Like, well, this is when. All right. Let's get to this now. All right. Let me get my notes up here of everything that we're going to cover with this. All right. And here we go with Unstoppable in 3, 2, 1. So, Unstoppable is the true story of Anthony Robles, a one-legged wrestler who defied all the odds and was able to rise up as a champion and become a star wrestler. Now, Unstoppable, I think, this is a big problem I kind of have with a lot of true story sports films, is that it seems like they more or less follow like a similar formula where, yes, it's someone overcoming the odds to win a sports match, which, you know, is still exciting. I do enjoy watching that. But so much of their victory relies on other people. This is why it's hard for me to watch like some films where it's not so much dependent on whether or not the individual can win a match, but whether or not, you know, the people with the money that could support, you know, a sports program would keep going with that. And that's just, it kind of like, I mean, yes, it is reflecting reality, and I don't hold that so much against the film, but it is one of those things that is hard to shake. And the fact that, and it's a fact that I think Unstoppable realizes, so they try to like veer away from it a little bit in here, because so much of it, you know, like I said, it all depends on whether or not, you know, you can win this match. Like, if you lose this match, you don't just lose at sports, like, you lose everything. And yes, on one level, that becomes a more inspiring sports story, but on another level, it really makes you recognize how insidious, like, the way that, like, the capitalist system works for how sports is set up, and how, you know, you winning a match is not just a matter of just proving your worth or showcasing how great you are or defying odds. Like, it's for your entire livelihood. And this is very much the case with Unstoppable. But I do have to admit, on that level, like I think I had to like temper my expectations because I kind of knew that was coming. And once I realized that, I think I realized that at that point, when the film is just gonna, kind of gloss over that, you mostly just have to embrace what you expect to happen, which is that Anthony is going to prove his worth. He's going to rise to the top, and he's going to prove himself as a one-legged wrestler. And it is pretty damn good to watch him climb that ladder. Mostly just because the performance by Jarrell Jerome is pretty damn good. Like, he's got that determination, but he also, like, this is supposed to be a character who comes, from a family that has like a troubled household, but also he has a lot of siblings that he has to connect with, and also he has to stand up to his abusive father here. So like, and I think what makes the film work so well on that level is just that you have some great actors here, because yes, like Jerome does a great job, but also Jennifer Lopez playing Judy, Anthony's mother, and Bobby Cannavale playing Rich, who is the husband in the house, who's a very abusive guy and an alcoholic, and he's just a generally awful person. And their performances are great. Like, Lopez has that fantastic desperation where she's not quite sure where to go with her life and tries to excuse the abuses of her husband, and Bobby Cannavale has like just that perfect presence of just someone, like, he's playing a cop, and that's very much in Bobby's wheelhouse for that type of an authoritarian figure, but also plays him up as a pretty terrible parent, and he does a pretty damn good job of being this extra hurdle in Anthony's life. So yeah, there are problems at home, and a lot of that drama is pretty damn good. And I every time that Anthony is at home, there's always that tension there, and I think the film plays it up beautifully. As for the sports scenes of Anthony wrestling, they're pretty damn good. I think Michael Pena, I think, is perfectly cast as Bobby Williams, the coach of the high school who's pulling for Anthony, but I never felt like they were as engaging as they could be. Like, it felt like they were about what I would expect from how you would shoot a sports film with high school sports, which they play up just enough of the tension. We get just enough like reaction shots of Michael Pena like shouting like, stay in it, and Jennifer Lopez cheering from the bleachers. We get just enough of that. Like, it's sturdy filmmaking to that degree. And I think also having Don Cheadle playing Sean Charles, who's like the college coach, who is much tougher on Anthony, but tougher in a way where he's more blunt and earnest. Like, I love like Cheadle's performance here because he has this manner of feeling like he's being genuine, but also being harsh at the same time. Because when he first meets with Anthony, he's blunt with him. He straight up tells him, look, you have some better college offers that are much safer, and personally I would take them, because if you take this route, it's going to be hard. And of course we know, yes, Anthony's going to go this route because, it's going to give him a leg. I didn't want to make that pun. It's going to give him a leg up, but I swear to God, I was not trying to make that pun with him. It's gonna be more beneficial for him that he feels, mostly because he doesn't want to be stuck in Iowa. Like, it's mostly just because Anthony wants to be closer to home so that he can still have a stable home life. And this is where like I kind of had to temper my expectations here, because this framing device about trying to compete in college sports while also maintaining your chaotic home life and make sure that your mom doesn't lose the house, and that like your siblings are not placed into foster care, it made my mind draw back to this other sports drama that I saw a few years ago. I believe it was called Safety, in which it was a similar situation. It was like someone going out to college to play football, and they had to like maintain like stuff at home to like keep playing, and it was like a delicate balancing act that he couldn't quite muster, and it ultimately came down to the decisions of a bunch of rich people who run the college to decide whether or not his life is going to be for the better. So like when I thought back to Safety, I'm like, okay, this is how it's gonna go. It's just gonna, it's all going to come down to whether or not Anthony can perform well enough to convince a bunch of people to, not ruin his entire life. So, okay, I got to remain locked in there and just watch the film just for the wrestling matches. And thankfully, the film never diverts that far from the matches. We're locked into Anthony's training. We get lots of training montages. We show him, trying to climb mountains and run laps despite, only having one leg, but sticking with it and never giving up and, just constantly training and always being there for his mom and, fighting for them to make sure that their mortgage isn't lost on the house and just trying to win the big match against like the toughest of wrestling opponents. And just trying to prove himself to that degree. And at that level, I think if you're coming into the film just looking for that, like if you've watched a lot of sports, true story sports dramas about like college athletes, this is very much familiar territory here. And it doesn't really surprise on a filmmaking level or a pacing level. Like it's got all the montages, it's got all the reaction shots and the tension that you expect from that type of drama. But of course, the real reason to watch here, I think, the primary reason to watch is for the cast. Jerome is a fantastic young actor here, and I think he really puts a lot of effort into this role. Like you really do want to root for him. That's like the most important thing you want out of this type of a sports drama, and it works. Jennifer Lopez is great. Bobby Cannavale is great. Michael Pena very much playing up to his strengths. And Don Cheadle is always a great presence here. It never felt like Don Cheadle was phoning it in with this, which he definitely could have. He just kind of could have been like that kind of passive aggressive type of coach. But he does put in a pretty damn good performance. Not like I said, nothing much like Michael Pena, nothing outside of his wheelhouse. It's what you expect. Much like a typical sports drama. This is all very much what you expect. But if you're going in with those expectations of what sports dramas are like, it's not bad. It's actually a pretty good film. It knows what you came to see, and it mostly gives you that. And I think the best way to encapsulate the film is there's a scene where Michael Pena, where Bobby Williams, played by Michael Pena, is talking to Anthony and trying to give him like a little bit of a pep talk, saying like, if you lose, it'll just make the wins all that much sweeter, and like losses will motivate you to do better. Like, you can't have you can't have good times without bad times. And Anthony just looks at him and says like, did you really expect that pep talk to work? And Bobby's like, well, kinda. And Anthony's like, well, it didn't, but I appreciate the effort. And I kind of feel the same way about Unstoppable. Like, it's not a sports drama that I would place high on the list of like my favorite films of the genre. It doesn't really pull off anything new in terms of its direction, but it does have enough good performances that even when I wasn't quite engaged as much with like the tension and of the sport itself, the actors really kept me engaged throughout it. And I mean, like it's a pretty damn good cast here, and none of them feel like they're phoning it in. So, on that level of just putting in the effort for making sure this sports drama is effective and entertaining, it mostly gets the job done. So yeah, Unstoppable's it's a pretty good sports drama. It's okay. It's sufficient. It gets the job done. It's sufficiently inspiring, I guess, is the best way to describe it. So Unstoppable will be in theaters on December 6th, limited theaters. You're going to have to look around for it. And it will be on Amazon Prime in January. Let's keep an eye out for that. All right, coming to the end of the line here. One more film on the docket here, and that is Martha. The documentary on Martha Stewart. This might be a quick one, because I don't have too much to say on this one. Although, if I'm honest, I didn't have too much to say on Unstoppable as well. It's just, yeah, come for the performances, All right, so let's get to the Martha Stewart documentary. So here we go with Martha in 3, 2, 1. So Martha is the documentary on the legacy of Martha Stewart, which had a lot of hills and valleys for a celebrity that most people knew as, as the celebrity homemaker. Like she was the woman in the media that, you look to, for cake recipes or decorating, because, it felt like she always had the best of all that. Like you can find, like today, you could find any number of, women or men on television who can show you how to like bake a cake or decorate the home, like Home and Garden Network and the Food Network have pretty much have all that covered. But Martha Stewart always felt like she had like the best ideas, because she would always make like the most decadent and elaborate of displays. Somewhat to like the detriment of the expectations that a lot of people might have had if they wanted to take on her projects, because as the film does bring up, like some people do talk to Martha and tell her that, a lot of the stuff that you're trying to pull off here is really elaborate that probably the average person would not be able to make in their kitchen. And Martha's like, well, they could, and why not? Because this film, like, it's very much up close and personal with Martha Stewart. I think pretty much to a degree where I think Martha Stewart is even uncomfortable with talking about a lot of her history. But she bears much more than I thought she would in this film. Like, she's upfront about her troubled history. Like, she brings up how her father was a bigot. She brings up how her husband would cheat on her. Her diary entries are revealed about how much hatred she had that her husband was cheating on her, even though Martha does admit that she was also cheating. But I think she might have looked at it as like a numbers game, because I think she said that she cheated once and like her husband was cheating multiple times here. And I think the audience who watches this film is kind of going to go back and forth on how they feel about Martha Stewart, because like she's very much, the best way to describe her is that she's a homemaking diva. In that, she's not just like this, this quaint woman who would just like bake stuff in the kitchen and just feel like, everyone's favorite like mother or grandmother. Like, she was behind the scenes vicious and controlling, and had very, very somber and down moments that just made her angry and frustrated as anyone would be. So I think like to a degree, like I could understand how Martha Stewart might be angry with this film for airing out a lot of her dirty laundry, because for the most part it's Martha Stewart talking, and we do get voiceovers from other people who knew her, like her children and coworkers, those who knew her, celebrity friends, and they're a little bit more vocal about how Martha was behind the scenes. And to a degree, like, you can understand why she would have these feelings, because it makes her very, very human. It's very much a case of how like people would say, like, there's this old saying of like, you shouldn't meet your heroes, because if you do, you're going to be dismayed by them. But I'm of the opposite opinion. I think you should meet your heroes, because once you realize that they're human and they're not perfect, it makes you feel less terrible about yourself, and that you're actually capable of doing more in your life and just taking inspiration, but not holding these people up on pedestals. This is very much the case with Martha Stewart, at least from how she's portrayed in this documentary, because she's not as prim and proper and perfect as she looked on her television show that was popular in the 90s and the 2000s. She had problems just like anyone else, and they were very... there were problems that a lot of people face. But at the same time, she also has, like, those moments of being a bit of a control freak and, just being angry and depressed in several moments. And they are emotions that, you can relate to. Like, it never feels like Martha Stewart just became that much more of an egotist. It always felt like she was struggling to define herself. Because like her mantra that she brings up throughout the film is that, she basically looks for voids in her life and tries to fill it. So like she looked at television and said, oh, there's not really any women on television who are making, more daring and elaborate creations of like food and decorations. So why don't we do that? And it was the same thing that she did for publication. She looked at, the publications and stuff like, Better Homes and Gardens and stuff like that, and just said, I'm not seeing anything that can like hold up, women to do something more with their craft and to become a little bit more personal. And again, filled that void. And it felt like as she kept going, she kept finding more to improve upon. Like at one point, of course, there's the one moment everyone is looking directly towards in this film, which is that Martha Stewart went to prison for not revealing everything to the FBI about what she knew about the insider trading with the people that she associated with. But during that time in prison, she actually formed a bond with the inmates, and even though she had limited resources, she didn't let it get her down, and she just kept doing what she usually did, which is making great meals and fine crafts and getting the prisoners to engage in parties and try to teach them all about cucumber sandwiches and different types of clothing they could make, and just kept doing what she always did. And by the time she got out of prison, she went back to doing what she wanted to do, more or less. Like they bring up how, the show wasn't quite the same after that. But then, she kind of went through that little bit of like the same transformation that Bob Saget went through, which is that, you've had this wholesome perception this whole life. Like, why not go off at this point? Why not stop being all wholesome? Like, you can still do all the stuff you love, but just, bring out more of that acid tongue. And she did at the Comedy Central roast, where she hooked up with Snoop Dogg. And, and a lot of people, in fact, probably an entire generation now probably only knows Martha Stewart with her associations with Snoop Doggy Dogg. And that's, which is great, because like now she's living it up on social media, and she's still doing all the stuff that she loves, while still, being pretty vocal about how she feels about, her relationships and her situation. And I think it's kind of fun to watch the film to that degree, because like I said, you never like firmly despise or love Martha Stewart throughout. She becomes a very complicated figure. I would say, based on the roller coaster that you go through in this film, by the end you might like her a little bit more, but I think that's mostly just because you see all the flaws in her and you see all the problems that she has. And I think when you just mount it up over time, you realize that, you kind of like her a little bit more, and that some of her issues kind of just made her more biting and interesting. Like at one point, when she's talking about like the trial that she was on when she went to prison, she brings up a New York Post columnist called Andrea Peiser. And Martha talks about how like Andrea, basically mounted this kind of like article that kind of smeared her and made Martha Stewart seem like such a bad guy, that it was like Martha Stewart was someone who needed to be taken down. And when Martha reflects on that in this film, she's just kind of like, well, yeah, but she wrote all that, but she's dead now, so don't have to think about that again. Except, here's the thing though. I don't know how many people know this, but Andrea's not dead. So when that came out in the documentary, she actually fired back and said, what was the exact wording here? I think she just wrote, "I'm alive, bitch." So it's one of those things where it's like Martha can't help herself. Like, I think she, she's vicious. And I think, bringing that viciousness and that more blunt nature out into the open, I think paints her in a much more complete light, where you're not just looking at her for, her show or what she baked or who she associated with. She becomes a much more interesting person to that degree. And I think just the way that she just keeps on going is just that she focuses on what she can control. Like, she brings up her philosophy about how, if you want to be happy for a day, you get drunk. If you want to be happy for a year, you get married. But if you want to be happy for a lifetime, you start a garden. And that's very much what Martha does. And even throughout the film, we take breaks to just go out and watch her maintain her garden, in which, there's a little bit more of that control freak that's still there. It comes here and there, like a little burst. Like it very much has that feel of like, like a boss who's been doing this for a long time and they're prone to outbursts, but they're trying not to. Like they're trying to not be that controlling, but they still want to be dominant. Like they still want to make it clear like they're in charge and they're trying to assert themselves. And I think it makes Martha Stewart seem like a more complete person. I have heard that she apparently didn't like the way that the documentary framed her because they think it made her look too terrible or bitchy. Honestly, I think it just makes her look more compelling and human because, like I said, people who say never meet your heroes, that's BS. Meet your heroes because they'll let you know that they're not prim and perfect, that Martha Stewart was not this, goddess of the kitchen and the decoration. She had problems. She had very, very big problems, like any person. And I think that becomes more inspiring because, like, if Martha Stewart's main goal is basically to show off how, any woman could make these elaborate displays, like they'd be capable of doing so much more, I think showing that vulnerable side makes like her mission more substantial. And I think it makes her a more colorful character. So on that degree, yeah, I really like the way that this documentary portrayed Martha Stewart. So Martha is currently playing on Netflix. And it's a damn good film. Okay. So let's do a quick recap and then I will get on out of here. So what did we review on today's show? We reviewed Heretic, the religious psychological thriller starring Hugh Grant. It's got some great philosophical ideas in it, and Hugh Grant's performance is mesmerizing for never letting that eccentricity die or, just shifting gears entirely. Grant's performance makes this film, although there are some great supporting performances, and fun little cameo by Topher Grace. If you can spot him, you gotta peer through his the way that he's filmed, the way that he's framed in the film. I also reviewed Nickel Boys, the film about two boys at reform school who try to escape, but also we shift to the adult aftermath, but also we shift to an all-encompassing view of life itself. And it is such a grand film that explores far more than just racism in 1960s Florida. It feels like a much more bigger and all-encompassing film about more than just, racism and trauma, but life itself. I love this film so much. It is going to be coming out in theaters in December and expanding in January. Do not miss it. It is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. I also reviewed Unstoppable, the true story of Anthony Robles, the one-legged wrestler. It doesn't really have that much outside of a typical sports drama, but it's worth it for the performances alone of Jennifer Lopez, Don Cheadle, Bobby Carnival, and I forgot the name. Jarrell Jerome as Anthony Robles. Watch it for the performances, but don't expect anything new if you've watched a lot of sports dramas. We reviewed, really quick though, Unstoppable. It will be in theaters on December 16th and will be heading to Amazon Prime in late January of 2025. We also reviewed Martha, the documentary on Martha Stewart, which actually paints a more complete picture of the woman who a lot of people thought was perfect with all her home designs and her cooking and her baking and everything. This film shows you that she's not all that perfect, but that she's more human. And I think it's a very fascinating documentary, and it's currently playing on Netflix. And finally, we reviewed Memoir of a Snail, a semi-personal story from Adam Elliott of Mary and Max fame. Deeply, deeply moving, gut-wrenching, and sincere stop-motion animated film. It is easily one of the best animated films that I've seen this year. Do not miss it. It is playing in limited release right now. So you might not be able to catch it, but watch for it when it arrives on VOD. So, plenty of great choices here. Not really, probably the weakest film I would say was Unstoppable, but I'd say to that degree, even if you don't like sports dramas that much, the performances were enough to win me over just a little bit. But among all these, I would say see Nickel Boys, but you probably won't be able to see that until January. So among all of them that you can see right now, I would see Heretic and Memoir of a Snail. They probably won't be in theaters for too long, so be sure to catch them if you can. So, if you would like to read written reviews of the movies I reviewed on today's program, you can check out my blog at movieswithmark.com, and you can read some more of my interviews and reviews over on twincitiesgeek.com, as well as some of my reviews over on filminquiry.com. Yeah, we got a lot more films coming up, and in the next few weeks here, it's like I said, it's for your consideration season, so we're about to get a huge storm of more films that are going to be coming in here. If you'd like to follow me, I do have some links in the description there. But I would like to say that I am shifting over more to Bluesky instead of Twitter or X, whatever. And I think it's because of like the big migration over all the crap with Elon Musk. So I'm going to be over on Bluesky there. Most of my mutuals have already gone over there now, so you can catch me there. Or you could just hang out on YouTube here. So yeah, just be sure to like this video to make sure that more people know about these films, and be sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date on the latest films. I'm not sure what I'm going to cover on the next stream, which I might be doing in about 2 weeks here. I do know for certain 2 films that I will be seeing in the coming weeks will be Wicked and Moana 2. But they're going to be a little bit closer to Thanksgiving, so I think I might review them on the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, or possibly Tuesday. I'm gonna have to look up when the embargo is for a Moana 2, just to make sure I'm not violating that. But for sure, in the next 2 weeks, I should have reviews of Wicked and Moana 2, so be sure to watch for those. And in the coming weeks, I believe I will be reviewing the Lord of the Rings animated film that's coming out soon. I'm trying to get a screener for Clint Eastwood's film that just kind of slipped in and out of theaters this last weekend, called Juror Number 2, which I do want to see. It's Eastwood is usually pretty reliable as a director, and this film is Nicholas Hoult, and I think it's a very big disappointment that this film just kind of went in and out of theaters, but it's kind of sad to admit that's kind of how Clint Eastwood's films have been going lately. And I say it's sad just because what was his last, like Cry Macho, I believe was his last film, which is actually pretty good. And that did last in theaters for a little bit, I believe. So yeah, we've got a lot more films coming up this season, so stay up to date. Keep an eye on this channel. Watch out for more live streams. Or if you can't even make it to the streams, I do divvy up these reviews and I do post them on the channel. And I am trying to get back into video essays. It's been a little bit tough. I've been a little bit swamped with work. But I do have some essays that I've been writing that I want to start filming soon, particularly regarding sex scenes in movies. And I do want to do a dissection of the Reagan film on a much broader degree, because I have seen it and it's god-awful, but it's god-awful in ways that I want to dissect more instead of just doing it on this stream here to give you like just the nuts and bolts. Like I actually want to there's a lot of history that I want to peel back here regarding the AIDS epidemic and the Iran-Contra scandal that I want to cover there. So that's the whole thing. But lastly, if you want to check out Patreon, I do host some videos that I don't put up on YouTube, as well as chapters from the current books I'm writing. I'm writing a book about Saturday morning cartoons, so be sure to check that out. And if you're in Minnesota, be sure to check out Secret Movie Night this Wednesday. I have a secret film. You don't know what it is until you get there and the lights go down. And I say... Well, I probably won't say anything. The lights go down because the movie will be playing. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that on the next stream as well. It's so much fun. So I can't wait to get out there to the theater and host a screening like that. But yeah, more reviews to come. So yeah, until next time, have a good one, everybody.